Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our second installation of UpStage Talks. Today, we are really excited to have some wonderful guests here to talk to us about networking, both online and offline. Remember networking? It was when you put yourself in very awkward situations, weren't sure how they were going to turn out. But there are so many ways you can fix that and fix your mentality going into it. And so today we have with us Emily Farris, who is a journalist and founder of the Boozy Bungalow. So she's definitely got a lot of great tips for us on networking, especially online. That is one of her core methods of communicating with people all over. And then Alana Cantillo, who is a senior director of advocacy for the New York Immigration Coalition, has a long history of networking within very particular political spheres. So we're talking a little bit about how to navigate all of those different worlds, how to encourage people to share information with you and to keep in touch. Really, a lot of it is about just personal connection and maintaining those connections. Let's tell you first about myself. My name is Maria Consuelo Gonima. I am the founder of Big Smile Co., which is a marketing communications firm focused on entertainment technology and philanthropy. And we are launching an app very soon called the UpStage Directory, which is the world's first directory dedicated to diversifying all panels. Why is that important to us? Because conversations are meant to be places where people have differing opinions, and you sort of want to play a game of true conversation where you want to walk away from a conversation feeling like you learned something or feeling like your perspective is at least informed. And so diversity is the core way to do that. We find that over time, especially in our experience in organizing conferences and putting panels together, that diversity is really challenging for some, whether it's the person who is offering a different opinion, feeling confident enough to speak their truth, or the organizer trying to find someone who really wants to put themselves out there in a conference or in a panel. So we're really happy to provide this information, this service, and again, start today with this wonderful conversation. We had our first UpStage Talks last week. It's fantastic, so please do go back to check that one out. And upcoming, we have Storytelling 101, Crafting Your Message on May 13th. And on May 20th, a panel about reaching the right audience and leveraging digital strategies. So a lot of these are very nuanced conversations around storytelling, personal storytelling, confidence development, and beyond. So let's introduce our panelists. Please, Emily, do tell us about yourself and your experience in speaking and networking.
Okay, hi. So I'm Emily Farris. I'm a writer, a lifestyle writer. I've been writing for 20 years, and I have the Boozy Bungalow. As Maria mentioned, it's an Instagram account, so at the Boozy Bungalow, and my blog, theboozybungalow.com, which I don't update enough lately. So my experience with networking is that I don't look at it as networking. So I moved to New York when I was 18. And I had no connections, and I had no job, and I had no apartment. I had nothing. And so everyone to me was kind of a connection. And I've taken that approach through my whole life. And, Maria, you mentioned networking as an awkward situation, and networking events are super awkward, but I usually avoid networking events and approach every event or every opportunity as more of a networking opportunity, even though that sounds opportunistic. But so I moved to New York when I was 18. I started writing, and to get an internship or a job, you have to go to events and talk to people and just put yourself out there and just introduce yourself to people. And I just started doing that at a very young age, and I never thought of it as networking. I never called it networking. So I started doing that in journalism and writing, and I got an internship, and that served me well. When I was reporting, and when you're writing, when you interview people, you make connections all over the place. And I've worn many different hats. So I started out as a writer. I got into politics and into the food world, and I was kind of writing through all of that. So it's served me well to be a person who just naturally connects with people. And I don't want to give away too many things that we're going to talk about later in the panel, but I don't want to give you my whole history, but yeah, writing, food, politics are different areas where I have been professionally and personally. And then one thing that really helped me in making connections is to host my own events. And so that's something I want to talk about later. But I started, the first event I really hosted, which I feel like connected me to people, was a casserole party. And Lacey, were you there? My very first one?
I was there.
Brooklyn.
Yes.
So yeah, I hosted a casserole party as kind of a joke. It was a Martha Stewart release party when she got released from prison. And people, or correctional facility, wherever she was. And people were supposed to bring casseroles, and it was this whole thing. It was very fun. It was a competition. And that kind of set I had very strict rules for it, and it was a competition, and it kind of set my path for hosting events and making people feel involved in something. So I had very strict rules. It was teams of 2, and you had to enter, and you had to fill out a whole form, and it was a whole thing, and it was a competition. And that kind of set the stage for me to create opportunities for people to be included in whatever I'm hosting or doing, as a way to really connect with people, and it connects other people. I'm rambling now. I'm going to stop.
No, that's fantastic. And we're going to be talking about that.
Creating events. I've like haven't talked to people face to face. So creating events and creating opportunities for people to really connect with me and with other people. And I think that's kind of, for me, that's the absolute best way to do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, we all have our way in, and a lot of it takes defining who you are. And we'll be talking about that in a moment. But I want to introduce Alana, who has a different route in and a different purpose for her networking. So
Thank you. Thanks to Maria and Lacey for having me and for working on this really important project, which has a really important mission. So happy to be here. My name is Alana Cantillo. As mentioned, I'm the Senior Director of Advocacy at the New York Immigration Coalition. My job so graciously let me be here today, so I'm going to give them a plug. The NYIC is a network of 200 member organizations across New York State that do direct services or civil rights advocacy, and I manage our state, federal, and local campaigns. And so engaging a lot with government sector, advocates, organizers. Before that, just more background, I think, giving folks talking about yourselves gives folks bridges and connectors, and connects you for, future engagements. I have an undergrad from Rutgers University. I grew up in North Jersey. I have a master's from City College, so I've been in public school my whole life and see kind of issues of inequity in society through that lens, from really early stages of folks' life. I was born in Barranquilla, Colombia. Like I mentioned, I grew up in North Jersey, always hyper involved in school and different initiatives, cultural organizations, mentorship, and other opportunities to really work with my community's most vulnerable. But before work in nonprofit, which my organization's mission is really much tied to a lot of the work that I've done, I've also worked in the for-profit sector. I did community investment for a cable company called Charter Communications, and before that, I was in government. The reason I sort of give that background is because I'm a huge champion for cross-sector collaboration. I think that multiple perspectives inform a better output, a better product, and trying to make sure that whatever project, initiative, or opportunity be the most impactful. So I really see my purpose as, someone whose systems more responsive, more inclusive to the people that they're ultimately going to impact, and so that they're less siloed and work together. And that's one of the reasons I've been intentional about working in different spaces. One of the things that obviously transfers job to job and title to title are sort of your relationship building through that lens of, bringing folks in together to work together. And I can talk about, how I do that a little bit later in the conversation.
The first thing we wanted to talk about, to bridge, I think both of you were talking a lot about bridging and the fact that you can be that bridge to connect other people. And that's really why you believe in networking and what the purpose is. But to do that, you really have to know who you are and define who you are. I think that's a big challenge for people, especially those who may not feel that their voice is necessary to be heard. Or, they may not know their reason for bridging people together, but all of us have one.
kind of defining myself
yeah, how did you decide casseroles were the way, or what does that mean
for me?
you?
And casseroles were one of many things that I've done, and I think that's been a benefit to me as a networker, because I have done so many different things and been in so many different arenas and dabbled in different professions. And I met Lacey doing country music at a bar, like a country music jamboree. I've done like food and politics and so many different things. So for me, I can't say that it's a particular area of expertise or a particular profession really that is my thing. For me, it's more, there's buzzwords that I kind of hate. Personal brand, that is one of them. But my personal brand has been, I'm very irreverent. So I am outspoken, I'm irreverent, I curse, I say what's on my mind. And I feel like that has served me well throughout all of my different, whatever hat I'm wearing.
Right.
I never reach the point of, I'm not like trying to be divisive or trying to polarize people, but I always have a little bit of an edge to me. And I think that if there were one thing that defined my personal brand, I think that would be it. But I'm also, another buzzword I don't love, authentic, transparent. And for me, it's very important to be kind of a real version of myself. I'm not putting my arguments with my husband. I'm not like whining on social media all the time. I can't say I'm incredibly earnest, but I am transparent, which I think makes me approachable and makes people comfortable.
Right.
And a big part of connecting with people. So a big part of networking is connecting with people. And a big part of connecting with people is making them feel comfortable, whether they are, you post something on social media. A lot of what I do is online because I moved back to Kansas City in 2009 after 10 years in New York. And I remember saying to people and feeling like I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. I'm worried that when I leave New York, and this was 2009 before, so social media was prevalent, but not as much as it is now. And I remember thinking, God, I'm really worried I'm going to fall off the face of the earth. And that didn't happen because I used social media to stay connected with people. But yeah, it's really about making people feel comfortable, providing an opportunity for people to connect, whether it's in a status, an online event, an in-person event, something else that I happen to be doing online. And whenever I do that, I'm very irreverent and transparent and authentic.
Right. And really, I think that stems from the fact that there aren't, or at least in media days past, there weren't as many people out there representing that sort of irreverence in an individual way that you could connect. So you were filling a sort of gap, not necessarily purposefully, but because you saw that opportunity to show yourself, that you can make other people feel comfortable to show themselves.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. And I started blogging in 2003 on Blogger. I was reminded of that this morning.
Right.
I started connecting with people through the comments section of blogs in 2003, writing just random stuff about my life and trying to make it funny and trying to make it relatable. Right. And that's just kind of been the common thread through everything I've done for the past 20 years.
And that takes a lot of putting yourself out there, which some people may not feel comfortable to do. But again, that's sort of defining yourself, not necessarily in ways that are like, I'm going to put it down on paper, but to say, you know who you are and you're portraying that self.
And people ask me this a lot. It is possible to put yourself out there and share parts of your life and share things that are relatable without sharing your entire life.
Right. So Alana, I think you're back. You seem crystal clear. I'm very excited about this.
Yeah, I hope so. I relocated, so you might have gotten a quick tour of my apartment.
It looks great. The lighting is amazing. So as we were talking about before, you were speaking to the many different spaces that you communicate in and the many types of people that you connect. We were talking about bridging and how it requires a really keen sense of self to be able to be that person that bridges. How does that apply in your work and your communication and the way you keep in touch with people?
So I have this story I tell about a conversation I had with my mom when I left work one day, and this was back when I used to work at the city council with Lacey, and I was telling her about I don't know, reporting back on some meeting or like some tough conversation that happened, because collaborations are tough, right? And she was like, oh, are you sure you should, you'd be like saying all that or like participating in this way? And my response was, that's why I'm there. That's why they hired me. Like, this is the perspective that they wanted to inject into their processes. They hired me for my skills and for my background, but also because of my identity and what I represent, being an immigrant, being a woman, being a young person, being someone who, who cares about government and politics and wants to be involved in that way, but also wants to be involved in the community and improving the environment for other people. And so, I feel like that is the moment where I was really sure in that the work that I was doing or bringing different aspects of my identity to the work was not, a disruption. It was a value add. Part of the reason, in my opening remarks, I wanted to, offer up some information on myself and things that I've done in the past, because I think when people kind of are interacting in a really, human basic level, and it really sort of level sets that we're all people, and that, today we're this role and, have this agenda and doing this work. But careers and lives are really long. And so you'll want to make a connection that's sort of, deeper than that. And the way that you do that is by opening yourself up and really, exposing yourself and being vulnerable.
Absolutely. And that's a hard place to get, for all of us, no matter what our backgrounds are, what our intentions are, what our goals and dreams are. Something we talked about in our earlier call was having like connections with purpose, but also not being intimidated by the sort of ladder, and really finding ways to level set. Do you want to speak to a little bit about that, Alana?
Yeah, and an entry point to build those relationships or make those connections. And it sounds so cliche as a woman, but I think folks were talking about it earlier about like being likable and, being charming, and, that level of interaction is disarming for people. And, I always tell my peers or like my mentees, when they're going into interviews and if you're networking for professional career prospects, I always say to have fun. Like, people want to work with people that they like. It's shallow, but it's true. It's people that you're going to enjoy their company and enjoy working with. And so, definitely sort of approach networking and try to have fun and try to really build relationships at a kind of human level. Because we all had those experiences. We all have families. We all have, some schooling, some background, some neighborhood we live in, like some thing that's universal to talk about. And that's really important because, like I said, our roles and our titles are fleeting, ever changing. We millennials have jobs for like a couple years nowadays, not for decades. And so I found that, you have to sort of like unlearn and like undo yourself of like the power structures and the hierarchies that like we sort of usually operate under, because they're so fluid. I was interviewing for one of the fellowships that I did, and one of the members of the board was on the interview committee. And so, very clear power dynamic. Someone has authority and decision making, and could potentially be a barrier between you and other opportunities. And then, less than 5 years later, I was in the private sector, running community investments, giving out grants to community organizations, and in touch with this board member that just a few years ago was, on a selection committee for a group that I did. And so, power can very easily, and those dynamics can very easily be, turned on their head and changed. And so if you conduct yourself in a way that you envision yourself because you very well could be, having lunch with a person and discussing different grant opportunities in just a handful of months. Then, you kind of don't idealize, or might not feel as nervous about your interaction with that person. And I think that's really important for us to just see each other as equal, and envision a future where those power structures are going to be flattened significantly.
Definitely. Yeah. We also talked a bit about how you should see every relationship, just reflecting a bit of what you said, you should see every relationship as a long-term potential relationship. It's not transactional. And I think, Emily, in a lot of what you do, again, there's this sort of string of a narrative and sort of a connection. And that's what makes people want to come back. You talked a bit about how you would create like challenges or games or something that becomes super memorable and a shared experience. How important is that to how you connect with people?
I think it's incredibly important, whether it's creating some sort of official system for someone to get into an event or a party, but they bring some of themselves into it, which makes it so memorable. So like the casserole party, which I don't do anymore, but I did it in Brooklyn and Kansas City. It was this thing, and there are these rules and there's a structure, but people have to bring something of themselves. So bring something that reminds them of home, or a family recipe or something. And I think that's really important. Just creating ways, events I've done, like craft events. So people, they come, they do a thing, but they bring their own experience, artistry to it. One thing I wanted to say, piggybacking on what Alana was saying, I think right now in these uncertain times, this time is like the great equalizer for some of those networking challenges that we faced. Sometimes those meetings, those interactions can even be physically intimidating if you're meeting with someone who has a high-powered job or is further up the ladder than you. I think right now we're very much in an equalizing time, because everyone is on the computer, everyone is in their house. A lot of people have kids running around in the background or a cat walking across the screen. And I think right now is a really good time to try and connect with people. Though I will say, if you're trying to connect with somebody who has small children at home, don't be offended if they can't hop on a Zoom call with you, because it's really hard. But this, I think people have talked about this time as a reset. And I think it also applies to making connections, and especially just connecting with people who you otherwise might not connect with, because we are all we're all experiencing the same thing right now. All of our circumstances are the same. So most people don't have an assistant at the desk next to them, or a house cleaner, or a nanny, or all of these things that make us feel very different. So it's a really good time.
Yeah, that's
for that.
Great
for
point,
connecting.
for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we talked a bit about also the fact that right now it's harder to just see someone at the bar or see someone at a meeting that everyone was planning on going to anyway. How do you feel, or how do you recommend people engage in this more digital world that we are? Obviously, we did have digital tools as a way to connect with people, but now it's not as casual. It's very intentional. It's very much more transactional. But
there's a benefit to that, because it is memorable, right? So you run into somebody at a bar, you meet, I met that person a few times, or I know this person from that. I have a very visual memory, so I actually have a hard time remembering people's names until I see it spelled out, until I type it out. So now when I'm connecting with people, if it's on a Zoom happy hour or something like this, I'm going to remember that person because I see their face, I see their name. Maybe there's there's an email that goes out, or a digital flyer that's made. And those things, they just kind of solidify your connection. They say when you meet somebody in person, you're supposed to say their name 3 times. Like, oh, hi, Maria, nice to meet you. Maria, what is it that you do? Maria, where did you grow up? Right? And then you're like, okay, Maria. But this format helps people remember who they're connecting with, because you have their name, you have their face, and there is a benefit to that. And I think because it is more formal, because it is more organized, and it's not as passing, it's not as casual, you do have an opportunity to create a more memorable scenario. I did a rosé happy hour recently, which Jenny was on my rosé happy hour. I won't get into details about how fun that ended. But nobody will forget it. I will say it was a memorable. Everybody had the same bottle of rosé, and we had the winemakers on, and it was just it just creates really good opportunities for memories and for really connecting with people in a very memorable way. And that when I think we're going to get to a little laundry list later, and my main point is about being memorable.
Yes, so expect some tips very, very soon. And Alana, we were talking about, how, especially what you're reflecting on here, so much of your work and your network requires action. How is that translated for you in this digital time?
Yeah, I think when we were prepping for this call, one of my tips was, don't let any ask be a cold ask. Stay engaged with your network, stay engaged with your community. And we have a lot of tools to be able to do that. Everyone's on newsletters or, follows each other on social media. And so, prioritizing the time it takes to know what other people are working on, to engage with their content. And I have this corny motto to sort of invest in our collective success. I see my community and the work that we do is often, reciprocal. Even if we're on opposite sides of an issue, we're still sort of informing the larger process. And so, yeah, just, one of the ways that I, support this sort of relationship building is also just by being organized. I have a pretty robust Rolodex, which is really just like a binder of all business cards that I have, and I keep them, and I know exactly where someone's business card is when they hand me a new one, and I organize it by sector, whether you're in education or labor or a lobbyist.
I've heard it's the stuff of legends. So, well done.
Yeah, but not just something super old school like that, right? Like you have all of our emails have contacts. Make sure that you're saving contacts and putting memorable notes in the section so that you know how you worked with this person in the past through your email. And I still keep a planner, and so I feel like I really value sort of archiving the information so that I can move back to that event where I might have run into someone, or that panel that we both attended, or a program like that. Just continuing to find bridges in the work that people are doing. And part of the reason I like government is because I think it's my personality, but it's also just the nature of the sector, being a generalist, knowing a little bit about everything. And that always kind of keeps you on your toes, being able to talk to different people from different backgrounds.
That's great. I mean, we all have our own methods. Sometimes I have business cards that are blank, so I can make sure that I will write on my card to personalize it for that person to remember me. Additionally, the other thing I do, and I think that's just the nature of my work, which is a little bit more entertainment focused and lifestyle focused, I will just add someone on Instagram rather than add them on LinkedIn first, because then they can know me personally. So yeah, we have all so many ways to do that in real life, and digitally, I think it's, getting that muster up to say okay, I want to reach out to this person, but I don't want to make it seem transactional, and I like them, but I do need something and I want to share something with them. So having that exchange is super important. And I think, Emily, you've talked very much about the types of, you kind of create products and experiences for people to hold on to. I think that is, obviously it translates in real life and online, but how do you recommend people do that if casserole parties aren't necessarily their thing?
Mm-hmm. So for me, it's about having a theme. It doesn't matter what the theme is. So if you're hosting an event in person or online, if you're hosting a party, if you're having 5 people over to your house for a dinner party someday, hopefully we can all do that again. It's all about having a theme. So casserole party one. I've hosted craft events where it's cocktails and crafts. I did an event, Easter egg dyeing parties, or for a New Year's party at our house a couple years ago. I was a sequin party. So I just said, wear something sequins. I don't care what, just wear sequins. And part of that, and I've talked a lot about making people feel comfortable. So if you show up to I've also talked about how I don't like networking events and how other events are anything else is like an opportunity for networking. And for me, you talked about LinkedIn versus Facebook. LinkedIn is like the networking event of the internet, right? It's awkward and nobody really likes it. And so I connect with people on Facebook and Instagram when I meet them, but it's about having something, a theme, a sequence, whatever, something that they can, when they come to the party. So you come to a party and everybody's in sequence. It automatically gives you a chance to connect with somebody else at the event, because you might be if you're at a networking event or a happy hour or a mingler or mixer or whatever, if there's no theme, if there's nothing that people are bringing, it's awkward to go talk to somebody. It's awkward to just like walk up to somebody and start a conversation and say, hey, I'm Emily and I know you, what business are you in? If you're at a party where everybody's wearing sequins or everybody's wearing a silly hat, or for me, it's the modern, the more fun equivalent of that hello, my name is name tag, right? So it gives you an opportunity to start a conversation with someone in a way that is not awkward and uncomfortable. And it's just fun. Like, oh, where did you find those sequin shoes? Or those shoes are amazing, or whatever the thing is. If it's a weird hat or a favorite t-shirt. And it doesn't have to be obviously apparel, but just finding a way to get people to connect with each other.
Yeah.
Whether virtually or in person.
Totally. A common denominator that can start a conversation.
Yes.
And Alana, we talked a bit about the platforms that matter to you. I know we talked about Twitter and listservs and things that are a little bit more specialized. How do you feel that things are different currently while you're trying to navigate, obviously, like a political subjects, political moments that are all in flux on these platforms that you've typically been communicating with people?
Yeah, I think, you definitely take for granted the regular, happy hours or events that you see people at, and the work that you actually get done in those spaces. And so it does take a little bit of effort to, send the happy birthday text or, congratulate someone on like some very successful town hall they just pulled off, just to let them know that like, you're still, around, you're still engaging, you're almost like still relevant because there's a lot of stuff going on, and folks have moved away, and you want to let people know that you're still working and focused on these issues. And so just taking the extra time to send those notices and just showing up. There's been a lot of things that other people are organizing that maybe aren't relevant to the work that you're doing today. But if you have the time, a lot of the organizing work that folks do and the advocacy work to do is just like getting, bodies in seats or eyeballs or folks in a room. And so if you have the opportunity to do that, RSVP, hold the time on your calendar. Say yes to things that are, maybe outside of your portfolio or the issues that you're working in, because it will, better prepare you and make you more rounded for some of those, one-off conversations that may be with someone that you haven't worked with in the past, and, just have a different orientation or perspective to the work that you're doing. And so, still using the content as if you're going to run into people on the street, and if you're going to run into them in happy hour, and understanding that those opportunities are so limited. So it might take a little extra time and effort to stay connected with them.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that is in part why we're excited about what UpStage can do, where it becomes a more direct line to say, like, I am here specifically to speak about my passion, my philosophies, my profession, and others who are there to receive that information. So we want to kind of cut the lines of sort of that not manipulation. They're words that I use just in communication that I'm always like, manipulation, leveraging. We were talking about just networking. There's so many nasty words around it. And I feel like I specifically love the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I use it all the time as a guide to younger communicators that I'm trying to explain things to. And so much of what we've talked about here is that. I think Carnegie said, people love the sound of their name more than any other sound. And it's because it creates an identity. It creates this connection. And then there's also tips like, compliment someone. For example, I like your sparkly shirt. I love the glitter in your hair. These things that really create moments of connection that are personal and not just transactional. So much of what we've talked about, there are techniques and tactics, but it's just about being a person and acknowledging that the person that you're trying to connect with is also a person. Shocker. Who knew this was so hard, but it truly is. Yeah. Okay.
And that's a really important point, because I think that what you guys are doing by like compiling all this information, why it's such a resource, is because every person should see themselves as a resource. They have something to bring to the table, and transactional or not, like there's an opportunity in the long run for that transaction to go both ways, and for whoever you're reaching out to for you to later support their work potentially. And so if you look at, networking from that perspective, that you have something to bring to the table, I feel like it's easier to engage, and once again, talk about the things you care about, and also let people do the same.
Everyone has a story. That's the most important thing to us, for sure. I know we were going to do our tips and tricks. Do you guys want to go for it? Just give us your top tips to communicate, and then we'll hit to top tips on networking, and we'll jump to some Q&A.
The first one is to be memorable. And that can mean so many different things, whatever that means to you. For me, part of it is my irreverence, and I'm the woman who's going to drop an F-bomb online or when I'm having a drink with you at a happy hour. But my main thing is my red lipstick. Like it's kind of my signature. For some people, it's their glasses. It might be suspenders, a bow tie. Just be memorable, whether visually or verbally, be memorable. And I've said this a lot, create opportunities for people to feel or be involved, and find a way for them to bring a piece of themselves into whatever it is that you're doing, but kind of creating a structure that allows for that ease of communication, but then letting them bring a piece of themselves into it. And then being a connector of people. Obviously, when you're networking, you're helping yourself to meet more people and get ahead, but be a connector of people and do it manually. Put people in touch, or create these events, host these events, whether online or in person. But connecting people is going to benefit you in the long run. People are going to want to pay back the favor, but it also just expands your network. Number 4, don't be afraid to ask for what you want or what you need, because if you're not going to get it if you don't ask. The worst thing that happens is somebody's going to say no. So don't be afraid to ask. But as Alana has said, you don't want it to be a cold ask. So follow people, show up for them, like their status, share their LinkedIn if you like doing LinkedIn, comment on their posts, promote their work, promote their content. So just show them that you care, that you're connected to what they're doing. And that's going to make it easier for you to ask for what you want down the road, whether it's a connection or a job leader, whatever it is. And that's my top 5.
I dig it. Alana, give us your dish.
I didn't organize them in a top 5 list, but Emily challenged me too. So I've definitely sprinkled mine throughout. But just to summarize, be organized, so that you're prepared to engage in these conversations, whether it's a big binder or your contact sheet or your agenda, your calendar. Make sure that you're prepared with all the information you need. Be charming, have fun, bring your best selves to these engagements. Number 2. Number 3, show up, even in spaces that you don't need to be, even if it's your mandate, even if it's your job. Definitely promote that kind of growth and create those opportunities to make new relationships by actually being in those spaces. 4th, that power is fluid. And so don't get so sort of caught up in those hierarchies in your engagement with folks. And then, lastly, investing in folks' collective success, be a resource when you need to ask for a resource, and see those relationships as reciprocal, because, you're building community and relationships that, are going to outlast this one, interaction.
And again, it's interesting because how do you determine importance and sort of prioritization of what it is that you want to either share or receive? I think sometimes we feel like we only have one shot with networking. But I think what we've talked about here, that's not the case. I think we need to see things as a longer term conversation. The you portray should always be consistent. I think that's another challenge that people may think through, like, oh, I have to today look my best, be in a suit, like do this stuff to win. But like, you're a winner no matter what, right? I don't know. Anyway.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Alana said like be charming, and I think that is hard for people sometimes to just like be charming, and talking about like being consistent. And when I think something that served me well, as I said, is that kind of transparency. And I hate my buzzword that I hate is authenticity. But if you are fake, whether you're at an event or online, people see through that, and it's not charming, and it's awkward, and it just whoever you are is that's what's gonna succeed and make it through all the thread. Just be yourself. Try to be charming, sure, but be yourself. Don't fake it. Don't try to be something you're not at an event or online, because people are going to see through that, and it's not going to serve you well in the long run. So,
and to add to that point, whether if you're someone who already has sort of like the media standards of what is the right type of professional, like sometimes I think, I've heard things like, oh, you're such a dude when it comes to like work, or you're like, I think, there's also the notion of code switching when you're in a conversation with someone. Like, how are you going to consistently be yourself when there is a standard of like, I need to be aggressive, or I need to get what I want? I think a lot of that is changing thanks to media diversification. But, what would either of you say to that? Have you ever felt like you had to be other to engage and network?
Well, you brought up code switching. So I'll say I have the privilege of being a white woman. So I wasn't even considering that when I said that. And so I think there's obviously, I have that privilege. So I've never been in an opportunity where I felt like I had to be something I wasn't, but that for other people, I'm sure that is a challenge.
But there are so many layers. I mean, as a woman, that's one layer, right?
I got into a thing on Instagram last night because somebody posted something I thought was funny. They said something about locking your kids in the basement. And I was like, you know what? Women have had to, like, all the systems that kind of help us pretend that we don't have kids, most of the time, we don't have access to any of those now. So like trying to it was a whole deal getting my husband and my kids even out of the house for this today. But like the expectations of, trying to have women pretend they don't have kids or something.
That is one of my favorite things that I've seen change. I don't have kids, but I do have pets, and they're all up in my grill all the time. And I can't even imagine if they actually talk back to me. That would be
it's kind of a miracle that I'm like I don't have a baby on my boob for this Zoom and have like a toddler in the background who's not getting enough attention right now because both parents are trying to work from home.
Well, thank the family for us. And then Alana, considering so much of your perspective and input into the conversations that you're in, your background has so much to do with that. But I imagine there's, like we talked about before, a power dynamic and the occasional need to possibly code switch. Do you feel like that is there and present?
I mean, you want to be, sort of professional. You want to think about audience, right? And anything you do, whether you're working with young people or, older, more conservative people, and make sure that code switching is important because you want to make sure that your communication is effective, right? Mm-hmm. If your communication isn't effective, then you're not meeting your goals. And so I think a certain adaptability and flexibility for your audience is important, because ultimately, like if your message isn't getting through and you're not able to get what you want to accomplish, then you didn't meet your goal. And so I think having that flexibility without any notions of fakeness or inauthenticity, but just, with understanding with the folks that you're interacting with, I think can be valuable, and something that I definitely would have folks, consider into, how they show up in a space.
I feel like there's one thing I want to mention. I have a bunch of friends in LA who are actors and actresses, and they have to go through situations where they may not be considered Latin enough for a role, where they have to like over amplify their Latinidad. And I feel like that is sort of the opposite of what I've personally felt in my like Latinness in the executive world. I have to sort of, understand that there are cultural dynamics that are different, that, I can't just hug everybody. Sometimes it's a little weird. There's so many dynamics like that in every industry and every part of our networking world. So we have a question.
We got a question from the audience. What is one piece of practical or what would be your best advice for someone just starting their career? And I'm going to build on that and say, for Alana specifically, I know you've done a lot of kind of more formal, I don't know if I would call it formal networking, but there are organizations that you can either pay to join or apply to join, fellowships, things like that, that really can help you gain contacts in the professional world. We haven't really talked about that very much. So yeah, kind of two questions. One, advice for someone starting out, and then along those lines, how do you feel about these more professional, established networks, how to break into them? Is it worth it?
My one piece of advice is that, to not think of your career as super linear. To be, flexible in what opportunities you would consider, what jobs you would be willing to, learn more about, and, get coffee with someone who says that they think, you could be good for a role. Always say yes in that, when those opportunities are presented, and show up, because you'll find that, you end up in places that you couldn't even imagine. I always reflect back on the complete lack of civics education that I had in my K-12 schooling, and that I didn't know positions like lobbyist or government affairs or intergovernmental departments even existed, because it was a pretty sort of shallow and narrow understanding of professions growing up. And so, I would just say that, if you think you have something you want to do in the long run, continue to develop goals and set goals for yourself, but allow a little bit of flexibility and creativity in how to get there, because you might be, building on skills that ultimately will make you more effective in that job. And to Lacey's point about different opportunities, there's ABNY, Association for a Better New York, has a young professionals networks. I've joined different junior boards or supported my friends, philanthropic efforts and network through that way, and also joined boards myself. And so there are a lot of different ways, whether it's just, there was a link posted on Twitter about a New York City politics trivia night that was put on by a bunch of people I didn't know, but I work in New York City politics. So I signed up and I got a team together, and I got to meet some cool people through there. And so these opportunities can be, really structured and, consistent, like a board membership or being part of a young professionals network, or they can be really sporadic and random and still really good opportunities. You just got to register and hold the time and bring a buddy if you need a buffer, but definitely put yourself out there.
Wing networker. It's always helpful. Emily, what tip do you give for someone at the beginning of their career?
It's kind of a similar, find out where the people are, the people who are in the industry that you want to be in. Find out where they are physically, where they are online, and be there, show up there, whether it's a conference, a bar, a happy hour, an event, a Facebook group, a Zoom meeting. Start making yourself a part of these spaces as much as you can. And obviously some of these spaces are exclusive, but again, I feel like we're in this period of this great equalizer where some of those barriers are coming down. And so, show up, be where the people are that you want to connect with. And some to the organizations. I know when I was starting out, and even mid-career, midpoint so far, a lot of those organizations are expensive and exclusive. So I found I couldn't afford, the hundreds of dollars a year to be part of the Culinary Writers Association and the thousands of dollars it cost to attend their conference. But if you can find ways to go, to work at one or volunteer at one, things like that, that's a really good way to make connections in an industry that you're interested in in being a part of.
So we're a bit over time, but this has been awesome. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties, but so thrilled that we were able to have this conversation. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you.
I personally am someone who has trouble walking into a room knowing that I have a mission every single time. So all these tips are super helpful to me, even though I'm many moons into my career still having these struggles. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having us.
Right. Bye, everybody. Take care. See you next week. Join us, please. Bye.
You all.